Hi, folks. We're so glad you're all here, and if you wouldn't mind, we'll ask you to take your seats so we can get started. Thank you. I know there's some bad traffic, so unfortunately we have a couple of people we expect to get here but are having some trouble getting here. So apologies for some late arrivals, but we know they're coming. My name is Lisa Tepper-Bates, and I've had the honor to work with these wonderful leaders on the transition policy committees on behalf of Governor Lamont and Lieutenant Governor Bysiewicz, and we're honored that you're here with us today. I also want to call out my colleague, Johnny Dock, who is the policy director for the governor, and we're just really pleased to have the chance to circle back to you and look at the first 100 days of achievements of this new administration, and also to hear your thoughts on the top areas of your work that we want to be able to focus on going forward. So thank you, and I think Johnny wanted to make a couple of statements.
Sure. I've had the privilege of meeting most of you in person. You've all heard my voice over the phone in the conference call that we did on Budget Day. I wanted to take this opportunity first to let you all put a name to the face and reiterate my invitation to be in my inbox and in my cell phone anytime, and also to join the chorus that you'll hear from the governor and from the lieutenant governor of just all of us saying thank you really very much for the hard work that you put into those documents and you continue to put into them. They were like a Bible to us in many ways as we were going through the budget and legislative proposal process, and they identified and prioritized both a lot of very big ideas and a lot of ideas that are extremely important and could really have only come from people with on-the-ground frontline experience and not from anyone sitting in an office at the Capitol. So thank you, everyone, very much.
Great. And with that, we'll turn it over to Governor Lamont and to Lieutenant Governor.
Take it away.
Well, let me just say thank you all so much. The governor and I sort of feel like we've gotten the band back together, if you will, because we spent a lot of time during the transition with you. We have been on the phone and in person picking your very good brains. And we have been referring back to our transition policy and moving that policy forward. And I just have to say thank you to the governor for his commitment to making sure that we brought forward a very diverse administration. We think what the governor has done is historic, to, on March 8th, have the governor announce at the first meeting of the Women and Girls Council that 50% of our commissioners were women, was a really great day for our state. We think it's historic, not just for our state, but for the country. We made a commitment to diversity. We are so proud of the diverse, highly competent team that we've put together, and it's been a pleasure to roll up our sleeves over the past 100 days and work really hard to try to put into practice some of the great ideas that you gave us. And, you know, I've been busy maximizing federal funds. How are we doing that? We're doing that by making sure that we have a complete count for the 2020 census, and many of the organizations that were part of our transition process are now part of the statewide committee that we have formed to do that. The Women and Girls Council has started its meeting, so our cabinet secretaries are out there working very hard to make sure that each of our state departments are putting into practice policies that don't need legislation, that are going to benefit women, girls, and families across our state. And we have been taking some steps to fight the opioid crisis in our state. And I've had the pleasure of going around the state and talking to families and law enforcement and medical providers about what we can be doing better. And I just want to say thank you again. We're looking forward to this continued collaboration. And I think this picture that we have right here, which is a big table, a big tent, diversity, smart people who are willing to volunteer their time, I think is just a hallmark of what our administration has been in the first 100 days, and we hope to continue that very collaborative spirit, and we thank you for sharing your time and talents with our great state. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our fearless leader, Governor Lamont.
Well, I told you we wouldn't forget about you. And we certainly have not forgotten about the work you do. I want to thank Provost of CCSU and a lot of friends here. I was a part-time adjunct professor for some years here. David Blitz in the background was my rabbi. And I want to just say one thing a little off topic, just because with particular students there. You know, you're going to hear a lot about regional solutions and tolling versus bonding and a lot of the issues of the day. And I've just done a few of these things today, and it hasn't come up, and I just want to bring it up that something really tragic happened yesterday when you saw Notre Dame in flames. And I just thought about that a little bit, just to keep everything in perspective. Notre Dame, which obviously predates the discovery of our world here, it survived the French Revolution and the ransacking that went on. It survived Louis XIV, who tried to redecorate it. It survived the Nazis, and it's going to survive this. And I'm thinking about the French and all of us a little bit. After 9/11, maybe younger folks would remember, but some of the other folks would. There was a headline in Le Monde said, after 9/11, today we're all American, nous sommes tous les Américains. And I feel a little bit that way when I think about Notre Dame in flames and what that means to our heritage. With that, let me just share one broad thought on the policy work that you guys did that was so thoughtful, and the level of expertise that we came, everybody just volunteering and rolling up their sleeves on very short notice. And Lisa will give you a better idea of how we're implementing it, what we got to do going forward, how we want to keep you involved. You're a board of advisors for the commissioners. The commissioners have been there for 100 days, so they can't hide anymore. It's time for them to meet their board of advisors, and they've all read your report and are ready to report on your report and what they've done and what they could do. But one theme that ran across all the different policy papers that I read is that Connecticut is made up of a lot of great pieces, but the sum of our parts don't always add up. And we've got to do a better job of working across those artificial borders. And shared services, it starts with our 169 towns, and we're having a fuss about how do we incent folks to share some of those back office services, and Brandon can talk about that. But that's a symptom of Connecticut a little bit too. I mean, we had our digital team, speak a lot about sort of the dysfunction of the way our government is set up, and lots of these independent silos that don't communicate well. That's why we followed your lead, and for the first time in history, we have a chief operating officer for the state of Connecticut, and that chief operating officer is going to help these different departments, these different commissioners, who run like their own barons, their own fiefdoms, work across those borders. I mentioned the digital world. We're set up the same way in state government, where each and every one of these departments has their own legacy IT system that goes back 20, 30 years, and sometimes these systems don't talk to each other. Maybe that's a bureaucratic issue, maybe that's a technical issue. But we've put in place, following your lead, a new head of Department of Administrative Services. His name is Josh Jabal. And he doesn't come from the world of politics. He comes out of IBM. And he's somebody that's really following a lot of your leads when it came to how he put in place an integrated IT system so all the different departments can talk to each other, how personnel reports up through him, so we can think about what our state government's going to look like across different departments, over the next 5-10 years. And, about a third of our state employees could be retiring in the next 3 or 4 years. So it's incredibly important right now as we think about what our state government's going to look like. Fran and the jobs and economy folks, you had sort of a similar message for us. You recommended, I think it was an economic czar or somebody that could help bring together, all the different facets of economic development, which is not just workforce development, certainly a lot more than incentives. It's about job training. It's about housing, and who can tie that together. So we put in place a new special advisor to the governor on economic development. His name is David Lehman. He got some attention during the approval process, and also doing DECD, Economic and Community Development. And it's a way that we're trying to bring those different pieces together. Speaking of which, when it comes to housing, is not just housing, but housing is mental health. Housing is transit-oriented development. Housing is also economic development going forward, and our very own Lisa Tepper Bates is going to be helping to take the lead there and tie together some of the different departments that I mentioned. So again, that they're working across those artificial boundaries. And I'll just leave you one other thought. Physician, heal thyself. We as the state of Connecticut, our municipalities got to do a better job of working together. Our different commissions and commissioners and departments have to do a better job of working together. And I, as a governor, have got to do a better job of working with my fellow governors. This whole idea of state's a little artificial. It goes back not as long as Notre Dame, but it goes back a long time, and these are artificial borders. So you want me to do energy, you want me to do the environment, you want me to do transportation. I can't do that unless I have a good, strong working relationship with our fellow governors. Brian and I were just talking on the way that we had a real problem potentially with Millstone. Millstone provides a half of our power, provides really all of our carbon-free power, and there was a real risk that they could potentially pull the plug if we couldn't find a way to work together and negotiate a new pricing deal. And I could do that by myself, and that would have been really expensive. But we got Gina Raimondo and Charlie Baker and all the New England governors, Republican and Democrat, got together, signed the letter, up their commitment to carbon-free power. That gave us a little bit more credibility as we sat down with Millstone, and you probably saw that we've announced the deal where Millstone's going to be here for the next 13 years plus, which gives us time. That gives us time, Brian, to think about solar and wind and all the other ways I can make sure that no governor is left in the position I felt like I was left in 90 days ago, where it was sort of take it or leave it. So these are sort of the messages that I heard going forward, and this is what we've taken to heart. This is what we tried to put in place as we reorganize our state government over a period of time. This is reflected in a lot of the legislation we have going forward. And I just want you to know that it meant a lot, and it's not some study sitting on a shelf somewhere.
And I just would like to say, as a shout out to the 10 or 11 students that we have joining us, is that you are the future, and the governor and I get up every day because each of us have 3 kids, and we think about how we're going to keep tuition low for you, how we're going to make sure that Central, our state colleges and universities are the best that they can possibly be, how we're going to create a pipeline so you know that you have a really great job waiting for you in Connecticut when you graduate. you are what we're thinking about every day. So we appreciate your being here, and we're looking forward to collaborating with you because it's all about you and the future.
Thanks so much, Governor and Lieutenant Governor. And we thought we would open the floor to hear from the policy chairs. So please pitch in your thoughts.
Education.
Good afternoon, Governor. Yvette Melendez. I first want to start off with a heartfelt thank you to you. You've talked about some of the themes that you've tried to employ as you have embarked on your first 90 days. As the legislative agenda was being plowed through, and when you first announced your agenda, one of the things that I was most impressed with, and I think truly is the theme that you have established in this administration, is courage. You truly have embarked on some very difficult subject matters. Having worked for other governors over the course of my many years, I have seen where there's a lot of agreement, but when it comes to some of these very difficult issues, there are oftentimes landmines that people just aren't willing to take the risk to take on. And I think the fact that you have made it clear that you're here to bring about solutions and do what's best for the people of Connecticut showed in taking on some of those topics. I mean, the Education Committee, we focused on some things that we thought were low-hanging fruit that perhaps were not going to be that difficult, and then there were others that we knew would be very difficult to embark on. I won't use the R word. I will use the shared services word. And I think that that was one where we felt that we could make a real difference in terms of our economy if we looked at how we ran school districts differently. Quite frankly, we weren't necessarily sure that that would be one of the things that would move forward right away. We thought of it as a longer-term goal. The fact that you were willing to have a conversation, and in fact, I think you've said that repeatedly, that you think it's an important conversation for us to have, I think was very impressive. And I do think that the conversation's not over. I think what you made clear is that this is something we need to talk about and ultimately get to, as you said in your earlier remarks. Also, thank you for your approach to diversity. It's much more than diversity. It's about inclusion. And the fact that you've done that in your administration, I'm also hopeful that as the education agenda, we also put forward a concern about the need to improve our teacher ranks and look at what our teacher ranks look like and ensuring that students, not just students of color, it's just as important for my son in Glastonbury to have a diversity of teachers so that when he goes off to college, he doesn't grow up in this homogeneous environment, that it's one where he has the experience of meeting different people. So I hope that as part of the education agenda is something we can revisit and ensure that we figure out a way to get young people interested in education, valuing teaching, and making sure that our teaching ranks are as diverse as they can be. So thank you.
Well, I can tell you we have incentives in this budget to do a better job of recruiting a more diverse teacher corps in terms of allowing folks with certifications out of state to be able to come to the state, incentives to go teach in some of our tougher school districts and stay there. Nothing better than having a great, inspiring teacher you can identify with in the classroom. Hey, Karen.
Hi, Governor. How are you? I just want to thank you for your leadership around women and girls. I was one of the co-chairs of the Women's Policy Committee with Senator Marilyn Moore, who's at the LOB today. But in particular, to see the really strong leadership early on in January with the announcement of the Council on Women and Girls, because we know that when women succeed, families succeed, communities succeed, and this really intense focus is really going to benefit not just women, but I think all genders in the state of Connecticut. Really very pleased also to see the announcement of policy in the workplace to protect victims of domestic violence across state agencies. To my left is Joe Gianni from Bank of America. We know they have similar policy in their private sector, and to see the public sector and your administration take such a strong position on this is really, really gratifying. And also to see paid family medical leave and minimum wage announced early and often in your narrative has been helpful, because again, we know that when families can be making a livable wage, when they can have the opportunity to take time when they need to, this really adds to that dynamic workforce that we're wanting to and thriving communities. So we're really pleased to see these initiatives and happy to continue to work forward with you.
I'd also like to thank you both. What I would say, two things. One, going back to Millstone, what's not told often is if Millstone had left, that was $1 million of charitable giving that they had given to local arts and cultural and education programs, youth programs. So it's not just the businesses; it's also the ripple the ripple effect through the communities. But what I just want to acknowledge is, for us, the silos have begun to break down, and what I would ask for is this sustainable the ability for us to keep coming together in some way, because it takes time to come up with these solutions. It takes people being at the table. I've had conversations with Brian and with Bonnie and with many others, but there's so many others we could have more discussion, more solutions, that there's more time for these committees in whatever way, shape, or form that may be, for us to continue to break down those silos and keep working forward. But I know on our side we've actually seen a big shift of collaboration that has never taken place before, by arts, culture, and tourism, which were previously distinct but related, are now actually broadening and including and actually really strategically and intentionally collaborating where we've never done before. And that's really due to this committee's work and setting the tone. So I thank you for that.
Good afternoon, Governor and Lieutenant Governor. So nice to be here today, and welcome to all my colleagues, and thank you for all being here. I wanted to echo what Yvette said earlier when she mentioned inclusion. And one of the things that I've been so impressed with, and I'm sure everyone else in the state is too, and it sets an example, I think, for Connecticut and your leadership, is how we've embraced the private sector in such a tremendous way. And the Dalio contribution in particular, the announcement last week, is such an unprecedented experience for every one of us in Connecticut. And I think it talks a lot about what you and Susan bring to the table, is leadership in a very different way, by embracing the private sector, the public sector, and the nonprofit sector, and bringing us all together to make shared decisions and take on responsibility in a way that we've never really been embraced to take on before. So I'm really proud to be part of this, and I want to thank both of you for your leadership. I think it sets a different tone of inclusiveness and an example of leadership that I believe is something in Connecticut. Oftentimes we seem to be followers and not leaders, and not setting precedent and setting new ways of doing business. And I think that this is talking about what this says is that this is a new day and a new era in Connecticut. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Fran. Let me just pick up on that for a second. I mean, in terms of Susan and I are working hard to get people who don't often work together to be working together. You mentioned the incredibly generous gift from the Dalio Foundation. And there are a bunch of, business folks who are supportive of, change in our public schools and empowering teachers to do more. And they're all the teachers, side by side, cheering together for the first time in a long time. They're going to have some resources and, more importantly, the respect going forward. We were talking, not just at Millstone, but previous to that, we were up at a state pier in New London, where, again, it's labor and the wind business community. We're side by side. It's not led by a government, but we are participating as part of that partnership going forward. And I like to see that. It's a little more controversial. I appreciate it. But when it comes to fixing our transportation system and bringing it to the 21st century, you do see business and labor standing shoulder to shoulder. And the leaders there know how important it is to the future of the state. It's not easy, but you see those folks standing together. You don't often see that every day in this state.
Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Lonnie Reed and I wanted to express our acknowledgement of your leadership on E3 issues, energy, environment, and economic development. And just for our colleagues around the table, so Connecticut has really important and significant greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. Last year, Public Act 1882 established a 45% reduction on 2001 levels by the year 2030. These are really important and significant targets. And we have 3 wedges to address them, and I wanted to focus a little bit on one of the wedges because it gets to exactly what you're saying. The first is we need to decarbonize our electric grid. And that's important because we fully expect that vehicles will be charging themselves using the electric grid. So transportation represents 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. We expect to see more electric vehicles on the road. And thirdly, our greenhouse gas emissions from how we heat our buildings, residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, from heating oil and propane, is our second largest emitting sector at 35% of greenhouse gas emissions. So as we move renewable heating and cooling technologies and electric vehicle technologies to a zero carbon grid, we're going to be able to achieve those significant greenhouse gas emission reduction targets to address and confront climate change. But you built the foundation of that with yesterday's announcement on the Millstone long-term agreement, which is really, really important to that. Yes, it provides baseload power. Yes, it's going to keep greenhouse gas reductions down by 25% throughout the region. But what I saw you doing there is, to Yvette's point and this point about inclusivity, is you have this value of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that was demonstrated in the region by bringing together the regional governors. This is all about us working collectively together as a region, and you demonstrated that. In offshore wind, that's the other piece to this zero carbon. What you're doing in New London by supporting an expansion of offshore wind procurement in Connecticut and working with the Connecticut Port Authority is going to create long-term jobs for an industry that really has significant prospects in Connecticut. So wanted to acknowledge you for creating that important foundation, because everything's going to build from that. And then lastly, Governor, as you went up and delivered that passionate budget speech, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Connecticut Green Bank and the energy efficiency contractors and the Conservation and Load Management Fund about your commitment to those resources and not wanting to see them swept. It's really important to the jobs in this state, and your commitment to that was really, really important for all of us. So I want to thank you.
And since we have a Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, you've heard about energy. I want to talk about the environment as well. I'm Eric Hammerling, was really pleased to be co-chair of the Environment Committee group with Frogard Ryan and our tri-captain, David Sutherland. So a couple quick things. First of all, thank you for bringing us together and letting us work with such amazing people. And I can say for a fact that one of the things that was most exciting for me, because I typically work on environmental issues almost as if I'm in my zone. I'm just going straight ahead. The meeting that was held allowing us to look at cross-cutting issues was extremely important, and I wish that we had more agencies that did just what you encourage these committees to do, at working together, figuring ways that we could band together and share effort. As Wendy was saying, I hope some of those seeds that you planted will continue to grow and eventually really bear fruit. I think that's an opportunity for growth. Also want to mention, as a way of saying thank you, something that is really important to Connecticut, both environmentally, economically, and in many, many ways, is our state parks. And you in your budget protected the passport to the parks, and to keep that really important program intact, and to keep the ability there for all Connecticut residents to get into state parks without having to pay an entry fee. That is a hugely important program, allows everyone to access are one of our greatest treasures. So thank you for that. And keep up the, the strong support of that program, because it's going to take that, getting through, we got through 100 days, let's get through the end of the session. And we look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you. Frogarch Bryan, co-chair of the Environment Committee, and it has been an absolute pleasure working with everyone around the table and with Lisa and the two of you. So I want to echo and share my thanks as well. I think the two things that I found really amazing about your leadership was how you have been able to instill the spirit of collaboration in all of us. I think it is empowering, and I've observed the amazing talent you have recruited for your inner circle. So I feel really good about that, and I want to say again, thank you very much. Now, following up what Brian just mentioned, top of mind for us is climate and climate change and what that means to our state here. And there's two sides of the coin, mitigation as well as adaptation. And I want to be sure that we know and acknowledge the great work that many, many towns here have done to come up with projects to live with a new normal and to live in the face of rising sea levels and climate change. And many of these projects are shovel-ready, waiting to be done. And I think it's upon us to find ways, innovative ways, to implement, because otherwise I think we won't be as well prepared as we want to be. And I think we're ready to stand here and help and think that through together with you, because I think leveraging opportunities exist and the creativity exists. So thank you.
And I would just say that we are aware of some of those projects because the governor and I have made it a priority to meet with mayors and first selectmen across the state. Both the governor and I have been meeting with groups of mayors, and I personally have met with 53 mayors, and the governor has also been doing the same. And I guess what I wanted to share that I hear from you and I see that resonates with people all over the state is generosity. You are showing generosity with your time and your expertise. We were amazed the first day when we met with our transition advisors to have 400 people show up at Eastern Connecticut State University ready to help, and the generosity that we've seen in the business community to have Ray and Barbara Dalio come forward and offer to help with $100 million and to raise another $100 million, and to have companies like Webster Bank say that they would help federal workers who were waiting for their paychecks, or to have Stanley Black & Decker step up to help with student loans. What I think the governor and I have learned is it's amazing what people will do if you just ask. So trust me, we are going to keep asking, and we thank you for continuing to give.
And perhaps on that note, we want to make sure to save some time for the students who are here as well.
Sorry,
oh, good. Thanks, Melissa.
Sorry, yeah, one more thing. I just wanted to echo what you said earlier about transportation and being the backbone of our economy and bringing together government and business leaders and labor together, and just hearing what we said when we had that press conference in December about having to have a hard conversation about tolling, because we really need to think about how we're going to raise the revenues that we need to make the improvements to our transportation system. So just wanted to echo what everybody else has already said, but being bold and being brave and doing the thing that's hard, and having that hard conversation with our state and saying, we need to really look at tolling as a way to raise the revenues we need for transportation investment. So thank you for that.
That's terrific. Thank you, Melissa. So we wanted to save a little bit of time, and we've got a little bit less than 10 minutes, but we want to hear also from the students who were kind enough to commit some time to be here today.
How about journalists from the CCSU Record?
You might regret that, Governor.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Hi, from the Recorder, as you know. What is going on with the textbook tax, and yeah, where are you with deciding whether or not that's going to go through or not?
So let me talk about that. The question was framed in as a textbook tax. Right now, we have sales tax used to pay for most of our state government, and the sales tax is disappearing as a percentage of that for a variety of different reasons. For one, to your question, it only applies to a minority of our economy now, just the over-the-counter Sears Roebuck type of economy. So I'll take the heat on this one. I was the person that said, look, I'd like to hold the rate and not increase the sales tax rate, but expand the base to services and other things that have been tax exempt. And it seemed to me it was unfair. I know, you do a lot in the digital economy and a little less, buying from the local store, but the local store is collecting sales tax. Up until recently, the digital economy was not. So that was why I thought it was a more reliable way to do things without having to raise rates. That said, let me tell you, I'm getting a lot of pushback on it. I think, you say when it comes to education, when it comes to health care, when it comes to food, even snack food, there are a variety of things that should be tax exempt. And that's where you have a legislature come in. I'd ask them at least to hold the line on the digital economy, because I think it does put the physical economy at a real disadvantage. There's a fairness issue there. And we'll wait to hear back from the legislature on that pretty soon.
Hi, Paige Sorensen. I'm a student here at CCSU. I just had a question. I'm not sure if this really relates to you, but you might know about it. What do you know about the Board of Regents implementing the 5% tuition increase on the CSU schools?
I can tell you that the Board of Regents is much in the news these days, and they are trying to consolidate some things, and they're facing a deficit in around $40 million, I'm told. And they're trying to find ways that they can make some savings and ways to pay their bills. And, frankly, I wish I could do more. I mean, the best investment we can make as a state is in terms of education. Susan and I inherited a $1.5 billion deficit, and we tried to fix things, without big tax increases. And I think we've honored that. I'll tell you, we want to do bold, innovative things, as you were saying, but I've also tried to keep faith with people. I mean, I've tried to keep faith when it comes to the Green Bank and our energy efficiency fund and maintaining the passport for our parks. There are a lot of commitments that our state has made over the years, and then it's like Lucy with the football, we pull it back. I hear that from the business community all the time. I thought I had these tax credits you gave me as an incentive, now they're not worth as much. So when it comes to tuition and education, look, we're putting, despite this horrendous budget deficit, we held the line on public education. Thanks to the Dalios, we're actually going to be able to put more into education than we have in a long time. Some of that may be going to workforce development, CCSU, and the community college system. And we're going to gradually get ourselves right the balance on this ship.
And I think Brendan Sharkey, who's the chair of the Shared Services Committee, would like to make a comment.
Well, I do need to give a shout out to CCSU in particular, now that I'm an adjunct faculty member here, Governor. One of my students is joining us today.
I'm a distinguished faculty member.
You are indeed. You are indeed, sir. Yes. I think the other thing with regard to shared services specifically, but also generally with all of our priorities and issues that we raised, and I'm speaking now in a different capacity as one of the, I think, only two former legislators, along with Karen, on the panel. The rubber is going to hit the road over the course of the next 6 weeks, as you know, with the legislative session coming to an end at the beginning of June. And so much of the ideas and concepts that we have proposed and recommended to you and to the administration lies in the balance over these next 6 weeks. With regard to shared services and the recommendations we made, along with my co-chairman Rick Porth, The cities and towns are, from what I'm hearing, I've been working with them, are kind of on pins and needles, waiting to see what the legislature does over these next 6 weeks in terms of a lot of the initiatives, the great initiatives that you've taken on, some of which have been a result of our work, but also some other initiatives that you've taken on yourself, many of which are controversial. But they also involve what I think we called in our committee a grand bargain concept, which is that this has to be a shared relationship between the state and municipalities. And the hope is, I think, among all the towns in the state, that agreement, that bargain can be reached. But it will, of course, take a lot of leadership on the part of the legislature as well, in addition to, as well as the governor's office, to make that happen. So for all of us, it's important for us to stay on top of the legislature, stay aware of what's happening with specific bills over these next 6 weeks, and continue to advocate for what we all have agreed is a priority for each one of our recommendations going forward, and make sure that the legislature hears our call as well as yours.
Hey, Mr. Governor, how you doing? Ms. Sorensen actually asked the question I was going to ask, very well put, but I'd like to associate myself with the comments of Ms. Melendez. It takes a lot of courage to take on these issues, and I rode around the state with you for months, and your sincerity and your willingness to take those issues on are great, but the thing I wanted to do was say, as a small business owner, as a young person in the state, as a student here at CCSU, who's graduating in May.
All right.
And I'm coming back here as a grad student for education. I think it can't be overstated the importance of having a small business person as governor as well. Somebody who knows small business, somebody who can set the tone. And I can tell you in my very brief comment here that there's a lot of energy and a lot of positivity that I see coming from the small business community, and I wanted to express that to the group, is that there is a different type of leadership coming from the Capitol these days, and it's one that I believe is very, very competent in small business, and I think that I wanted to make sure that got known, that there's a lot of energy, and thank you very much for your commitment to helping small businesses grow in the state.
What are you getting your master's in? Can we recruit you to be a teacher, Jay?
Well, that is actually my intention. I intend to teach. My student advisor here, Dr. Felton Best, and Dr. Blitz have been incremental in getting me involved and getting me interested in teaching. And so the comments I like to associate myself with Ms. Melendez they are heartfelt. I am a father in this state, in Windsor, Connecticut, and it just really does mean a lot, both from an education standpoint and a small business standpoint, to look across the table here and not just see names and suits, but you see business people, teachers, and especially at the governor's office, lieutenant governor's office, you see small business savvy leadership, and that means a lot to my company, which is experiencing great growth in this state, and I think it's only going up from here. Thank you.
Excellent. Congratulations.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the event. I just want to again thank all of you. If we're not working together, we're not working. That is something that we know from this governor and this lieutenant governor. And you should know that the governor has very specifically tasked me to follow up with all of you to make sure you meet with the commissioners to keep exploring your ideas in more detail. So that is on my to-do list with you. But thank you very much for being here, and many thanks to the students and to our host, Central Connecticut State University.
Let me just say one last thing, if I could. First of all, if you got Blitz and Best, you've got the best. So you know how to pick a mentor, which is the most important thing, in life. And yeah, Brendan says, okay, we're doing some controversial things. All right, well, I'm not here for my health. I'm here to make a difference. And I could say a little more of the same, nickel and dime around the edges. We can borrow a little more. People probably won't notice. They never did in the past. And that's not the way I'm going to do it. And I'm asking people to make some tough choices, and some of it involves sacrifice. And I could really use your help, if you agree with me, to stand up and push a little bit, because we're pushing a bit uphill, and it's going to make a difference. And I think Johnny or somebody said, one thing that Susan and I really feel blessed with is that everybody we've asked to help is said thanks for asking, what can I do? I've got folks who are advising me, and they're not doing it for the money, believe me. They're doing it because they really believe this state is at a crossroads right now, and now's the time that they can make a difference. There's some amazing state employees. If I like to surprise my guys down in Greenwich, I say, you'd be impressed with the quality of the people that show up every day and work their heart out because they believe in what they're doing at DEEP, what they're doing in education. That's why they do this, because they believe in it. And so I'm fighting for each and every one of them as well. So this is the beginning of something. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.